huge increase. And this year, that trend is continuing. We've had 3 months in a row over $1 million. So I feel comfortable that we're actually going to hit probably 11.5 million. That's where I think we'll be. And that's really, when I started this, what I wanted to do. I wanted to shadow what I think our actual sales tax is by about $1 million. So that gives us that cushion that we need for an economic downturn. So if we hit a recession, sales tax numbers will dip. That provides $1 million cushion for me before I have to be short of revenue and start looking for ways to cut. And then if we don't have a recession and we do hit the 11.5 million, that goes into the fund balance. And that's where this unassigned fund balance that we just allocated tonight, a lot of it's coming from. So by going up by 1.5 million, though, we're not going to have another $3.8 million surplus fund balance in 23 that we're looking at in 24. So that number is going to change, which is part of the reason why I had projected the fund balance the way I had. Yeah, Supervisor Feed there.
But quick question. The WCA does an analysis of projections of sales tax through their analytics division. Did they come up with roughly the same number that you're coming up with?
The 11.5 is the number that they gave to me. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, that's the number I try to shadow. I always try to be a little bit more conservative than what they're projecting, for those reasons that I just explained. It's worked really well for us over the past few years. We've never had a fiscal year that ended in the red since I've been here, and we've continued to grow in excess of our sales tax number. So this big increase, though, this really brought in $1 million extra. So the bulk of that went to pay for the structural deficits that we had. We had about $800,000 in structural deficits. So most of it went to pay for those structural deficit portions that I have. And then a little bit of it is helping to contribute to that 5% average increase that I have for employees. So there's really not a big secret. There's only a couple of numbers that move dramatically within the budget, and this is one of them. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time explaining that. The general property tax, you'll see, is a negative $12 million. So when you add up, when you add up that account number 41110, general property taxes across all the budgets, that equals the amount that I put on the tax bills. So I have to put a negative amount here in order for the sum of all of them to equal each other. And then on interest revenue, you'll actually see a negative amount in fiscal year 21. That's a book value amount. So we changed the value of our assets based upon a market valuation. And so those go up and down throughout the year based upon where they're purchased at compared to where they're valued at the end of the year. Held to maturity, though, those will all turn around and become positive gains. That's at least what our investment broker keeps telling me. Right, Leah? Yes. So county treasurer, so you'll see that they have a negative fund balance amount. So what that tells me is that they generate more revenues than they have expenses. So they have interest on taxes and penalties on taxes that they get credit for. So therefore, they have a negative general property tax amount. If you look at penalties on taxes, last year we had 215 and we're only budgeting 150. And so that's going to be one of those line items that I take a look at. It's not always on the expense side that I have to cut additional expenses. Sometimes I look at our revenues and say, well, you're just underestimating our revenue, so I'm going to increase your revenue amount to get to my $1 million that I need. Their wages and fringes are very close to where they were the prior year. And then on the expenses, they were up by about $9,000 on expenses. Some of that was banking fees, software, stuff like that. Facilities. So they went from $1.9 million to $2,252,000. So, a good $250,000 increase there. So I don't think that's all in wages and fringes. If we look at that, though, yeah, it's only about $70,000, $60,000 that went to wages and fringes. So where are they up? So Jim tells me that the new building that we're going to build, it's going to cost more to run electricity, heating, cooling, utilities. So that's one of the side effects of growth, though, is increased operating expenses. So we have electricity going from 200 to 280,000. We have gas for heating going from 91,000 to 155,000. Building maintenance is up $25,000. We have other contractual services, which I think is custodial. That's going up by $20,000. So these are the types of things where we're seeing increases in our facilities budget. So part of it is inflationary. So if you look at operating supplies, this is probably stuff like salt and sand that they need for maintaining parking lots. There's inflationary factors on that, so we're seeing increases in those items. The fleet vehicles, that's an in and out, that's interdepartmental charges that we have for usage of vehicles. And that concludes the operating budgets requested for 2023.
And Ken, you're just looking for feedback at this point, right?
Yeah, if there was
We don't
anything
have
in
to take any
there
action.
that you said, you know, we don't need to heat that new building, let's cut that number down. You know, we can buy mittens for the employees instead. I'm looking for suggestions like that. I mean, not specifically that one, but anything that you can say, you know, I disagree with the line item here, or I need to understand it more before I agree or disagree with it. But now's a chance to provide some feedback before I make that $1 million worth of cuts, so that if you said, well, I'm really in favor of this, or I'm really opposed to this, that would factor into those decisions. We didn't have any within this group of departments, but if we had any new position requests, I would have highlighted those at that time. It would have been reflected in their wages and fringes. I would have highlighted that separately. So it wasn't in this group. Some of the departments that we review at some of the other standing committees, I highlight that. And that's a great opportunity to say, you know, we absolutely need those positions added, or we don't need those positions added. Actually, that's the next item on the agenda. You get a snapshot of what all those are. But that's a great way of input also into the budgetary decisions, is on new positions, because those are usually always new costs for the county.
Okay, does anyone have any feedback then, based on what we just reviewed? Supervisor Long?
I did have a number of questions, but you answered them all in your review, so thank you very much. And I'll just point out that I do have a lot of confidence in our department heads and putting a lot of these numbers together, so thank you.
Yeah, and Lee and I sat down with every department head and we went through these line items, and the department heads were really very cooperative with us, because they knew that I had $1 million to cut. I knew that going into my meetings with them. And so we talked about, I go, well, you know, could you do with a little bit less here in this item? You know, does this has to happen next year? Could that be delayed? So we talked about a lot of those things. So I have notes on a lot of those. Those will be changes that I end up making in that final budget recommendation. But the department heads have been very, very cooperative. A couple of them, right towards the end there, I just went in and said, I want $100,000 out of your budget. You tell me where it's coming from, but it's coming from somewhere. So I think the sheriff actually gave us more than I needed. Yeah, he was very, very cooperative.
Oh, good to hear. All right, any other comments or feedback? Doesn't look like it. So we'll move on to the next item. Report on new positions in 2023 budget.
Yeah, so I'm required to report to you any new positions that are being added to the budget. So this is the meeting where I do that. So basically, at this point, I've kind of identified which positions I'm going to include in and which positions I'm not going to include in. So I have it's actually a pretty short list. If you look at the bottom line of this list, my recommendations are going to be for .315 net new positions at a cost of about $61,000. So very minimal of what's going in, but actually every line item on here is approved other than one, and that was a legal assistant within the district attorney's office. And really, part of that is, not that they don't need help, they do, they really have no place to put them. And so 2023 is not their year. So they should come back in 2024, the year that they're going to be moving into their new offices, they would actually have space to put somebody at that point in time. We've talked about some other ideas also, though, with the district attorney's office to help alleviate some of their workload. But that was the one position out of all the requests that I did not approve. So just briefly on the other ones, community development eliminated a position that was grant funded, where that they're going to actually contract for that service and eliminated that position. In ADRC, we had some shuffling around. So we're increasing the Adult Protective Services case manager by a .125. We've reduced some nutrition cooks and aides from some of our meal sites. We went to contract services. So there was a change in methodology there. The nutrition program supervisor, then we increased by a .2, and the outreach coordinator we increased by a .12. So a lot of these are employees that are sitting at .875 or something that we're bumping them up to full-time. They're already benefit eligible, so really it's just the incremental cost of the wages to get to full-time. It's a way for us to gain additional labor hours without adding really new employees. It's just adding some additional hours to employees that aren't full-time currently. So this is, some of these requests have been on the books for a couple of years, and this year is their year. They're going to get this request in the county administrator recommended budget. Some of the changes are swapping out one position for another. So we're going to swap out the HHS operations manager, and really it's a retitling to an HHS deputy director. There'll be some additional responsibilities that Bob is going to assign to that employee then with the new title that they have, but it has a very small incremental change. So it's just a one in, one out position, so a net zero change in FTEs. But I want to be transparent about the changes that we're having in the organizational structure. And so we add these on this list also. We have a grant-funded position. This was the opioid settlement money that we're creating that social worker in the jail position for. Down here we have social workers that are basically swapping departments. So we're going to eliminate a social worker out of the CCS, and we're going to add a social worker within the children's services. So one in, one out. It's one of the things that I've worked with the HHS director about is prioritizing which divisions within HHS need the additional help. And if you can, switch the staff. I mean, it may not be an actual person that transfers divisions. It might be somebody that left. So instead of filling that, we're going to fill it with a new person in a different division, but reallocating the resources that he has in order to meet where the bigger demands are. And so this is an example of where he's been able to do that. Same with the nutrition program changes that he had. It's a reallocation of the resources to other areas. So I'm glad to see that he's been working on that. In the children's services, again, these are 2.875 positions that we're moving up to full-time. These are going to give additional support to a division that's really, has some challenges. The children's services is probably one of our more challenging divisions right now. So you are seeing additional resources being allocated to that division. Public health, they have a grant-funded position for a health educator. So you see that position added on here. And then a public health nurse, a 0.15 increase in the public health nurse. In justice services, you're seeing one of those transfer positions where we're eliminating a pretrial caseworker and adding a pretrial case manager. So there's a subtle difference between it, but a pretrial case worker is more on the data entry side, and a pretrial case manager is managing cases with clients. So it's a shift in where they've determined the work is needed at, and so that's where the change is. It does have a cost impact because they're graded at different levels, so there's about a $10,000 difference in cost, so we're reflecting that on here. Within the Sheriff's Department, It's really more of a title change. It has zero cost implications, but we've eliminated a law enforcement assistant out of, it's really in the patrol area, and we've added a law enforcement assistant within the jail. So it's moving an administrative staff. In this case, it was a person, and they just shifted where they work, who they're supporting. So we've added that position. We actually had that position in the budget. We had eliminated it about 5 years ago, so it's adding it back in. So I don't know who did all their paperwork over the last 5 years. They might have a lot of catching up to do. You got to pick up these jokes when I give them, guys. There's all right. The Sheriff's Department. So that is not a course services deputy. That's a court services deputy. My spell checker didn't catch that, though. Yeah. All right, so a court services deputy. So the sheriff is giving up one of those positions to create a new lieutenant. So it is a union position going to a non-union position. It's adding an additional layer of middle management. But for his organizational structure, he really felt it was necessary. It has about a $10,000 cost impact, and I'm going to recommend that in the budget. And then the very last one, Phil has an administrative assistant who's retiring at the end of this year. He would like to change that position to an assistant veteran service officer. And so the difference is an administrative assistant does a lot of the paperwork, but you have to be that CVSO in order to assist the veterans with their benefits. In order to log into the system and go over those things. So he wants all 3 people within his office to be able to do that task. And so it's upgrading that position in order to be able to do that. And it has about $11,000 cost impact to upgrade that position. But it'll provide better services to the veterans in order to do that with a small office. So those are the positions. Other than a couple of grant-funded ones, the net tax levy impact, I think, that we have is about $61,000.
All right, any comments or questions? It's kind of an amazing amount of shifting for .315 net FTEs. Hopefully it provides that increased capacity for everybody. It looks like we're adding some capacity, so that's good.
Yeah, we really towed the line because new positions, I think, was about 4th on the list for county board priorities. So I really emphasized that I was not going to be considering new positions. So you can see that departments got creative. You know, well, I'll give up this position if I can have this position. And so instead of just asking for the new position, they made some sacrifices and made some priority decisions. So that's good to see. And then a lot of the requests were really just, you know, can I roll this .875 up to a 1? It'll give me the extra hours and it'll really be helpful for my department. And so that's really where the changes are that you saw.
Yeah, so we owe the departments a thank you, I guess, for thinking that way. Appreciate it. All right, any other comments? You're just looking for any feedback if we're
Again, it's
concerned?
feedback. So this is how the county administrator budget is going to be structured with these changes, the ones in and the one that's out. And so if you strongly agreed or disagreed with any of these, now would be a great time to tell me, rather than after I print all the budget books and have to change them then. So that's really why we do it this way, is a chance for you to give early input for the county administrator in case I'm in the wrong direction, like an LTSB or something like that.
Supervisor Long.
My only request is, can you line up the descriptions a little better with the items? Because there's a lot of overlap and it was kind of hard to follow. So when
brackets around them in the spreadsheet.
yeah, it's right. So
Lines, column lines,
Really
cell lines, yeah.
whatever, so it's a little more easy to read. So thank you.
Color. Throw some crayons my way.
All right, I don't think there's any substantive comments outside of that. Outside of your very important comment, Supervisor Long. All right. Then we are on to requests for future agenda items. Any requests for future agenda items? Nope, seeing none. Announcements and correspondence? Any announcements?
Happy birthday to Tasha Cardinal today.
Happy birthday. All right, date of our next meeting, October 11th. So we will adjourn at 6, 7.
Did you want to talk about future meeting dates?
Oh, yeah, right. So we, to kind of accommodate there's a conflict with the St. Croix EDC meetings for some of us, and also, I think it's kind of been a challenge for staff for us to be on this second week. So starting in January, we will move to the third Monday. But we're giving some leeway here.
Monday, not
Third
Tuesday.
Monday. Third Monday.
And Tuesday will work if we need to. We moved the library meeting.
Oh,
For you
okay.
guys, for you all.
There's a kind of a quirk, so Tuesday. I hear Tuesday from staff. I mean,
Just make it a Paul is gone night.
And Kara, I'd gotten back to you, and I just said that I've got tentative commitments for the first quarter of the year and the last couple of weeks of the month, so it'll just be a little bit up in the air as to how things work out for me.
is those on the third Monday then, or would Tuesday?
Each month for the first quarter of the year,
Okay,
but it is what it is.
okay. Well,
So the third would work.
third Monday or Tuesday.
Well, usually that's the last
It's
2
the same
weeks, so
conflict.
I'm saying last
Yeah.
2 weeks are tough.
Okay, well. But with the Tuesday, is the Tuesday right away that you've moved
No,
it?
I'd go ahead and schedule it the way you've got it, and
Okay.
I'll just see how it all works out.
Okay. The thumbs up
Monday's fine.
for Monday? They're saying,
Mondays, Tuesdays?
Staff
The
the
third week.
staff sounds like they want Tuesday.
Yeah, the third week works really well from a timing perspective of the rotation and distance from the county board meeting. It just seems to work really better. We've been struggling with this second Tuesday.
I mean, I'm open to the third Tuesday, if, it sounds like that's what staff wants, if everyone else is open to that. Okay,
Speak up if you have a
yeah, I
preference.
mean, if you have a preference, we're wavering. You're open.
I would prefer Tuesdays, but I will make Mondays work. And logistically speaking, third Mondays, Martin Luther King Jr. Day falls on the third Monday
Oh,
probably.
yeah, with some
and
holidays.
President's Day.
Okay, well, let's do the third, let's go back, I guess we'll go back to the third Tuesday, starting in January, though.
Monday Night Football with the Packers.
Right, okay, so, now everyone listening is very confused. Starting in January, we will move back to the third Tuesday. Yep. Okay, all right. I think we're good. All right, meeting is adjourned now at 6:20 instead of what was 6:17 before. Yep, thanks, everybody.